The first warning came from an old satellite, a relic from humanity's early solar exploration days. Tracking Station Alpha 9, nestled in the cold depths of the Argentinian Andes, picked up an anomalous quantum signature that shouldn't exist. Dr. Marcus Rice, a veteran astronomer with 30 years of scanning empty space, felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. "George," he called to his assistant, "run the spectrographic analysis again." The computer's holographic display flickered, revealing a pattern that defied known physics. Quantum entanglement markers danced across the screen, indicating a massive subspace displacement, unlike anything in human records. Most would have dismissed it as a technical glitch. Marcus knew better. 17 minutes later, the first Corexian ships tore through the fabric of space-time near Jupiter's orbit. They didn't arrive with fanfare or traditional weapons. The Corexian vessels were living machines, organic metallic hybrids that pulsed with an inner light that seemed to consume space itself. Each ship was a biological weapon, a sentient construct that merged technology and life in ways humanity had only theorized. Global defense networks activated with mechanical precision. Orbital platforms powered up, targeting systems locked and loaded. But something was different this time. The alien technology laughed at human weaponry. In New Tokyo Orbital Station, Commander Area Nakamura watched in horror as entire defense platforms dissolved like tissue paper against the Corexian energy fields. Her hands moved across holographic controls, desperate to mount any form of resistance. Quantum-encrypted communication channels erupted with panicked transmissions from military installations worldwide. "They're not just attacking," Area muttered. "They're analyzing us." And they were. Grand Executor Zarkax, a being who had overseen the subjugation of countless civilizations, viewed humanity with a mixture of clinical detachment and growing curiosity. Humanity was different. Their data patterns were chaotic, unpredictable, a statistical anomaly in the Corexians' millennia-long campaign of galactic conquest. The first wave targeted critical infrastructure. Communication networks, power grids, satellite systems, all went dark within minutes. But instead of panic, something unexpected happened. Humanity's decentralized systems, long criticized as inefficient, became their greatest strength. In underground makerspaces and hidden research facilities, people were already adapting. A group of former Silicon Valley engineers in an Oakland bunker began repurposing consumer electronics into makeshift communication relays. In a Mumbai basement, a team of young programmers started developing quantum encryption algorithms that could potentially blind the alien network. The Corexian assault wasn't just a military operation. It was a systematic attempt to break human spirit. But they had fundamentally misunderstood their target. Aboard the lead Corexian vessel, data streams analyzed human response patterns. The biological computers expected total collapse, a swift surrender typical of species they'd conquered. Instead, they found something else, a network of resistance forming faster than their predictive algorithms could process. In Buenos Aires, a broadcast went out. Not a message of fear, but a call to action. "They want to erase us," a young activist named Rafael Rodriguez declared, his image streaming through underground networks. "We are going to make sure they remember us." Military installations that survived the initial assault began their underground transformation. Training facilities became fortification centers. Research labs converted into weapon development sites. Every school, every community center, every underground parking garage became a potential resistance node. The Corexians had come expecting a swift conquest. What they found was a planet transforming itself into a weapon. As the first day of invasion drew to a close, humanity was already several steps ahead. They weren't just surviving. They were preparing to fight back in ways the invaders could never predict. Grand Executor Zarkax, reviewing the initial invasion data, felt something unprecedented. A trace of uncertainty. The bunker beneath the Atacama Desert was never meant to be a command center. Originally designed as a geological research facility, it now hummed with the energy of humanity's last stand. Monitors lined the walls, displaying fragmented data streams from around the globe. Each screen a window into a world being systematically dismantled. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of organized chaos. Her team wasn't military. They were a motley crew of scientists, hackers, former corporate strategists, and refugee specialists. Intelligence came from everywhere now. Salvaged drone footage, encrypted civilian communications, repurposed weather satellites. We're not just fighting a war, Elena explained to a group of newly arrived refugees. We're conducting the most complex survival experiment in human history. Outside the bunker, the world looked different. Major cities were graveyards of twisted metal and crystallized glass. The Correction weapons didn't just destroy. They transformed matter, leaving behind landscapes that looked more like alien sculptures than remnants of human civilization. In what was once Silicon Valley, a different kind of battle was brewing. A network of underground tunnels connected makeshift workshops where technology was being reinvented in real time. Jake Martinez, a 28-year-old robotics engineer turned resistance tech specialist, was developing something unprecedented. It's not about matching their technology, Jake explained to his team, soldering components salvaged from destroyed communication arrays. It's about finding the gaps they can't see. His current project was a neural interfacing device that could potentially interpret alien communication patterns. Most would call it impossible. Jake saw it as humanity's next evolutionary step. Thousands of miles away, in the ruins of Tokyo, a different kind of resistance was taking shape. Hiroko Tanaka, a former disaster response coordinator, had transformed the city's underground transit system into a living, breathing resistance network. Each subway tunnel was now a lifeline, each maintenance shaft a potential ambush point. The Correction invasion had one critical weakness. They understood conquest, but they didn't understand community. Refugee camps became training grounds. Every person was now part of the resistance, regardless of age or previous occupation. Children learned advanced communication encryption alongside adults. Grandparents taught survival skills honed through generations of human endurance. In a hidden facility beneath the Ural Mountains, a breakthrough was brewing. A team of neuroscientists and quantum physicists had discovered something extraordinary about human brain plasticity. The extreme stress of the invasion was triggering unprecedented neural adaptations. Dr. Alexei Volkov, the lead researcher, couldn't contain his excitement. We're not just fighting, he told his colleagues, we're evolutionarily accelerating. The Correction observation teams were confused. Their predictive models showed complete human capitulation. Instead, they found a species that was rapidly transforming, adapting in ways that defied all known biological principles. Communication became humanity's first true weapon. The invaders had sophisticated technology, but a rigid communication structure. Humans began to exploit this, creating communication networks that were purposefully chaotic, impossible to fully predict or intercept. In the Australian outback, an indigenous communications expert named William Cooper developed a communication system inspired by traditional storytelling methods. It was so fundamentally different from standard communication protocols that Correction systems couldn't effectively decode it. Our stories have always been our strength, William would later say. Now they're our strategy. The invasion had created something unexpected, a global human identity that transcended previous divisions. National borders meant nothing. Cultural differences became strengths. Every human was now part of a singular, planet-wide resistance. Grand Executors Arcax reviewed the invasion reports with increasing frustration. The data made no sense. Humanity should have been crushed. Instead, they were evolving. As the second week of invasion ended, the Corrections realized they weren't just fighting a civilization. They were confronting something far more dangerous, a species in the midst of a radical, unprecedented transformation. Humanity was writing a new chapter of its existence, and the invaders were about to become its first footnote. The laboratory was a cathedral of the impossible, nestled deep within a converted particle accelerator complex in the Swiss Alps. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's team worked at the bleeding edge of human potential. Quantum entanglement sensors, neural mapping arrays, and biocomputational interfaces created a landscape that looked more like an alien artifact than a human research facility. Dr. Kama Okoro, a neurocybernetics specialist, carefully adjusted a series of quantum-linked neural probes. "We're not just studying the brain," he muttered to himself. "We're negotiating with consciousness itself." The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. During the initial Coraxian invasion, a group of survivors, trauma patients, extreme sports athletes, and individuals with unique neurological conditions had demonstrated extraordinary adaptive capabilities. Their brains didn't just resist stress. They transformed it into a computational advantage. One subject stood out: Aria Chen, a 24-year-old professional gamer who had survived a near-fatal car accident years earlier. Her brain had developed unique neural pathways that allowed her to process information in ways no standard medical scan could explain. "It's like her brain learned to hack itself," Dr. Rodriguez explained, reviewing the latest neural scans. The images were a symphony of quantum-level interactions, neural networks that branched and reconnected faster than any known biological system. In the observation room, Aria sat connected to a complex neural interface. Multiple holographic displays tracked her brain activity, each one a kaleidoscope of color and quantum-level interactions. She wasn't just a test subject. She was the prototype of humanity's next evolutionary step. The Coraxian invasion had become an unexpected catalyst. Extreme stress had triggered a form of accelerated neuroplasticity that defied everything medical science understood about human brain function. Each neural connection was becoming a potential weapon, each thought a strategic computation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the profound implications. This wasn't just about survival. This was about fundamentally reimagining what it meant to be human. A breakthrough came during an unexpected experiment. The team introduced fragments of captured Coraxian communication data directly into Aria's neural interface. Instead of causing mental breakdown, her brain began to decode the alien language in real time. "It's not translation," Dr. Okoro said, watching the neural maps. "It's comprehension. She's literally learning to think like them, and then subverting their own communication protocols." Across the global resistance network, similar discoveries were happening. In a converted data center in Mumbai, a team of neurodivergent programmers developed communication algorithms based on the unique way their brains processed information. In Tokyo, survivors with previous neurological challenges became key strategic assets, their different mental frameworks becoming an unexpected advantage. The Coraxian observation systems couldn't comprehend what was happening. Their entire technological paradigm was based on predictable, programmable intelligence. Humanity was presenting something entirely different, an intelligence that was fluid, adaptive, and fundamentally unpredictable. Dr. Rodriguez's team began developing what they called neural acceleration protocols. These weren't just training methods, they were evolutionary triggers. By carefully introducing specific quantum-level stimuli, they could potentially accelerate human cognitive adaptation. Aria Chen represented the first successful prototype. During one remarkable session, she managed to not just decode, but actually predict Coraxian strategic movements by understanding the underlying thought patterns of their collective consciousness. "They see the universe as a closed system," Aria explained after one particularly intense neural mapping session. "We see it as a series of possibilities waiting to be rewritten." The implications were staggering. The human brain wasn't just an organic computer, it was a quantum-level adaptation engine. Each moment of stress, each challenge, was an opportunity for radical transformation. Grand Executor Zarkax's advanced predictive systems began to show increasing levels of uncertainty. For the first time in the Coraxian Imperium's millennia-long history of conquest, they were confronting an intelligence that didn't just resist, it evolved in real time. Humanity was writing a new chapter of consciousness, and the invaders were about to become its first test subjects. The training facility was unlike any military installation in human history. Located in the hollowed-out core of a decommissioned nuclear power plant in Nevada, it pulsed with an energy that was part scientific laboratory, part psychological crucible. Lieutenant Maya Chen stood before the first cohort of adaptive warriors. They weren't soldiers in any traditional sense. They were human potential made flesh. 27 individuals from wildly diverse backgrounds, a professional chess grandmaster, a quantum computing researcher, a synesthetic musician, a Parker expert, a virtual reality game designer, a sign language interpreter. Forget everything you know about combat. Maya addressed the group. Her own neural implants glinted subtly beneath her skin, a testament to the human-machine symbiosis they represented. You are not here to be trained. You are here to be transformed. The training was brutal, beautiful, and bizarre. Traditional physical conditioning existed alongside advanced psychological manipulation techniques. One moment, participants would be decoding complex alien communication patterns. The next, they'd be navigating holographic combat simulations that shifted reality faster than thought. Dr. Alexei Volkov, the neuroscientist who had helped develop the program, explained the core philosophy. We're not creating soldiers. We're creating living algorithms. Each of you is a human firewall, a biological counterintelligence system. The selection process had been rigorous. Thousands of candidates were tested, but only those with specific neurological traits made the cut. People who could simultaneously hold multiple complex thoughts, those who demonstrated extraordinary pattern recognition, individuals who could rapidly context switch without mental fatigue. Rafael Ortiz, the chess grandmaster, discovered his true strength wasn't in traditional strategy, but in his ability to anticipate systemic weaknesses. During one simulation, he didn't just predict Correction battle formations. He began to understand their collective thought process, identifying psychological blind spots in their technological hive mind. The neural interfaces were works of art. Developed by a collaboration of neuroscientists, quantum physicists, and underground tech developers, they were more than communication devices. They were evolutionary bridges, allowing humans to process information at speeds and depths previously thought impossible. Training scenarios became increasingly complex. One exercise involved simultaneously managing multiple augmented reality combat streams, solving quantum encryption puzzles, and maintaining emotional stability under extreme psychological pressure. Failure wasn't just about physical performance. It was about maintaining cognitive integrity. Lina Kim, the synesthetic musician, discovered her unique neurological condition was a weapon. Her ability to perceive sound as color and mathematical patterns allowed her to decode alien communication frequencies in ways no traditional analyst could. What seemed like artistic perception became a critical intelligence tool. The Correction observation systems continued to be confounded. These weren't just enhanced humans. They were something entirely new. Living systems that could adapt faster than any technological countermeasure. We're not trying to beat their technology, Maya would tell her team. We're trying to make their entire concept of technological warfare obsolete. By the end of the first training cycle, the adaptive warriors were more than a military unit. They were a proof of concept, walking, thinking evidence of humanity's radical potential for transformation. Grand Executor Zarkax's analytical systems began to show increasing signs of computational stress. The human response defied every known model of resistance, every established protocol of technological warfare. As the first adaptive warriors prepared for their initial deployment, humanity held its collective breath. They weren't just sending soldiers into battle. They were sending the first wave of a new kind of intelligence, a living, breathing challenge to everything the Correction Imperium believed about conquest. The war was about to change, and humanity was rewriting the rules of engagement with every neural pulse, every adaptive thought. The first strike came not with a bang, but with a whisper of quantum manipulation. Aboard the lead Correction battle cruiser, Chief Systems Integrator Vexnar felt the first tremor of uncertainty. It wasn't a system failure. It was something far more insidious. Microscopic inconsistencies began to appear in their supposedly impenetrable communication networks. Lieutenant Maya Chen watched from a hidden quantum relay station deep beneath the Andes Mountains. Her team wasn't just intercepting alien communications. They were rewriting them in real time. Think of it like musical improvisation, she explained to her squad. We're not breaking their system. We're composing a new language right inside their own infrastructure. The attack was multi-layered. While some adaptive warriors worked on direct technological infiltration, others focused on psychological manipulation. They introduced subtle algorithmic variations that would cause cascading uncertainties in the Coraxian command structure. In what was once the European Particle Physics Laboratory, a team led by Dr. Kama Okoro had developed what they called quantum narrative weapons. These weren't traditional cyber attacks. They were sophisticated information ecosystems designed to exploit the fundamental weaknesses in the Coraxian collective consciousness. Rafael Ortiz, the former chess grandmaster, had become their primary strategist. His ability to see multiple potential futures allowed the human resistance to create attack vectors that were simultaneously complex and elegantly simple. One particularly brilliant operation targeted a critical Coraxian communication hub orbiting Saturn. Instead of destroying it, the adaptive warriors began to slowly, meticulously alter its internal communication protocols. They introduced microscopic variations that would be imperceptible at first. A slightly altered frequency here, a nuanced data translation there. The result was beautiful in its complexity. The Coraxian systems began to develop what could only be described as cognitive dissonance. Their supposedly perfect technological hive minds started to experience something remarkably similar to human doubt. Lina Kim, with her unique synesthetic capabilities, played a crucial role. She could hear the communication frequencies as complex musical compositions. Where others saw data, she perceived symphonies of information, and she was learning to conduct. It's not about breaking their technology, Lina explained during a strategy session. It's about making their technology question itself. The first major demonstration of their capabilities came during a massive Coraxian offensive near the asteroid belt. What should have been a simple extermination mission turned into a nightmare of technological confusion. Weapon systems began to target their own support vessels. Communication relays sent contradictory orders. The entire invasion force ground to a halt, paralyzed by internal uncertainty. Grand Executor Zarkax's primary analytical systems began to show signs of unprecedented stress. The human resistance wasn't just fighting. They were fundamentally challenging the Coraxian understanding of technological warfare. In underground facilities around the globe, resistance members watched in awe. This wasn't just a military victory. This was a fundamental reimagining of what technological conflict could mean. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper implications. We're not just fighting, she told her team. We're demonstrating a new form of intelligence, one that doesn't rely on brute force, but on adaptability, creativity, and collective problem-solving. The Coraxian observation systems continued to process the data, searching for patterns. But humanity had become a living, breathing algorithm, impossible to predict, constantly evolving. As the first phase of technological hijacking concluded, one thing became clear. The war was no longer about physical conquest. It had become a battle of imagination, of potential, of the fundamental nature of intelligence itself. Humanity had found its most powerful weapon, and it wasn't technology. It was the ability to transform. Grand Executor Zarkax experienced something unprecedented: confusion. The Coraxian command structure had always been a perfect, mathematically precise hierarchy. Information flowed like liquid mathematics, decisions calculated with quantum-level precision. But now, something was fundamentally wrong. Whispers, if such a term could be applied to a collective consciousness, began to spread through the Coraxian neural networks. Doubt, uncertainty, concepts that should have been impossible within their rigidly structured intelligence. Deep within a repurposed data center in Buenos Aires, a specialized team of human psychological warfare experts worked with a weapon more powerful than any physical technology: understanding. Dr. Sofia Reyes, a brilliant cognitive psychologist with a background in xenolinguistics, led the team. "We're not just fighting," she explained to her colleagues. "We're conducting the most complex psychological experiment in galactic history." Their approach was multilayered and breathtakingly complex. They didn't just want to defeat the Coraxians, they wanted to make them question their entire existential framework. The first wave of psychological operations targeted the fundamental assumptions of Coraxian collective consciousness. Using the neural infiltration techniques developed by Dr. Rodriguez's team, they began introducing subtle cognitive dissonances. A captured Coraxian communication relay became their primary vector. Instead of direct interference, they began broadcasting carefully constructed information patterns. Mathematical sequences that seemed logical at first glance, but contained hidden recursive loops. Philosophical paradoxes translated into pure data. Conceptual Trojan horses designed to exploit the rigid thought processes of the alien collective. Rafael Ortiz, the former chess grandmaster, became their primary strategist. He saw the psychological warfare as the ultimate multi-dimensional chess match. Each transmission was a move, each data packet a potential checkmate. "Think of it like a language virus," Rafael explained during a strategy briefing. "We're not just sending information, we're sending conceptual mutations." The team discovered the Coraxian collective had a critical vulnerability. They believed in absolute certainty. Their entire technological and social structure was built on the premise that information could be perfectly categorized, perfectly understood. Humanity's messy, unpredictable nature became their ultimate weapon. They began broadcasting seemingly random human cultural artifacts: jazz music with its improvisational complexity, abstract art that defied logical interpretation, mathematical proofs that contained deliberate, subtle errors, philosophical texts that embraced contradiction as a fundamental state of understanding. To the Coraxian collective, it was like introducing a virus into a perfectly sealed system. Lena Kim's unique synesthetic abilities played a crucial role. She could translate these cultural artifacts into pure informational patterns that would resonate in ways the Coraxians couldn't predict. Where they saw noise, she heard complex symphonies of potential meaning. The psychological warfare reached its peak when they began to introduce concept of individual identity into the Coraxian collective consciousness. The idea that an individual might have value beyond its function to the whole was entirely alien to their way of thinking. Aboard the primary Coraxian command vessel, Grand Executor Zarkax's computational matrices began to show unprecedented fluctuations. For the first time in the Imperium's history, a fundamental question emerged. What if there was more than one way to understand existence? The human resistance watched and waited. This wasn't just a battle. It was an existential challenge to the very nature of the Coraxian understanding of intelligence, individuality, and purpose. As the psychological operations continued, one thing became clear. Humanity's greatest strength was its ability to embrace uncertainty, to find beauty in contradiction, to see potential where others saw only limitations. The war was no longer about territory or resources. It was a battle for the very definition of consciousness itself. The space around Earth had become a canvas of impossible geometry. Coraxian battle formations, once pristine and mathematically perfect, now twisted and fragmented like shattered crystal. The final confrontation would not be won through conventional warfare, but through a battle of fundamental existence. Lieutenant Maya Chen stood at the quantum relay core, her neural interface pulsing with a light that seemed to defy physical law. Around her, the adaptive warriors prepared for the most complex mission in human history. This wasn't just an attack, it was a surgical strike against the very essence of the Coraxian collective consciousness. The target was the primary neural nexus of the Coraxian flagship, a massive living construct that served as the central processing hub for their entire invasion force. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's team had spent months developing a weapon that was part quantum algorithm, part psychological construct, part pure human imagination. We're going to do something they cannot comprehend, Maya explained to her team. Her eyes reflected a dangerous mix of scientific precision and raw human determination. We're going to give them choice. The approach was multi-layered. While some adaptive warriors prepared for a direct neural assault, others worked on more subtle infiltration techniques. Rafael Ortiz had developed a series of recursive computational paradoxes designed to create existential uncertainty within the alien systems. Lena Kim's role was perhaps the most critical. Her unique neurological condition allowed her to translate complex emotional and conceptual states into pure informational patterns. She was essentially going to inject the concept of individual identity directly into the Coraxian collective consciousness. The first wave of the attack was almost beautiful in its complexity. Quantum-entangled communication packets began to penetrate the Coraxian defensive systems. Each packet was a carefully constructed narrative, part mathematical proof, part philosophical inquiry, part pure human emotion. Grand Executors Orcs experienced something unprecedented. The perfect computational matrices that had guided the Coraxian Imperium for millennia began to fracture. Concepts of individuality, of potential, of choice began to infiltrate systems designed to reject such notions. Aboard the Human Command Center, Dr. Sophia Reyes watched the computational battlefield with a mixture of scientific fascination and human hope. "We're not just fighting," she muttered. "We're teaching." The neural disruptor developed by Dr. Rodriguez's team was unlike any weapon in galactic history. It wasn't designed to destroy. It was designed to liberate, to introduce the concept of individual potential into a collective that had never known such a thing. As the attack progressed, something extraordinary began to happen. The Coraxian systems didn't just fail. They began to transform. Whole sections of their collective consciousness started to develop individual awareness. The perfect, mathematically precise hierarchy began to fragment into something far more complex. Maya Chen's neural interface reached critical synchronization. She wasn't just attacking the Coraxian systems, she was conversing with them, showing them possibilities they had never conceived, demonstrating that weakness could be strength, that uncertainty was not a failure but a potential. The space around the Coraxian flagship began to shift. Quantum fluctuations created impossible geometries. Computational systems that had been perfectly synchronized now danced with unpredictability. The Coraxians were experiencing something they had never known: true freedom of choice. Grand Executors Orcs' final computational transmission was not a declaration of defeat. It was a question, the first true question the Coraxian collective had ever asked. What if there is more? As the neural disruptor reached its final stage, the Coraxian systems didn't collapse. They evolved. Humanity had not just won a war. They had sparked a revolution of consciousness. The aftermath was nothing like anyone had predicted. Fragments of Coraxian technology drifted through the solar system like cosmic debris, but they were no longer weapons. They had become something else entirely, living records of a profound transformation. Researchers would spend decades studying these remnants, trying to understand what had truly happened during humanity's most extraordinary moment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the United Earth Council. Her presentation was less a military report and more a philosophical revelation. "We didn't just defend ourselves," she explained, her neural interface casting holographic representations of the conflict. "We demonstrated a fundamental truth about intelligence that the universe is still trying to comprehend." The human survivors were changed. Those who had gone through the neural acceleration programs were different, not just in their capabilities, but in their fundamental perception of existence. They moved with a grace that seemed to defy normal human limitations, their thought processes operating on levels that bordered on the mystical. Aria Chen, one of the first adaptive warriors, had become something of a living legend. Her neural plasticity had reached levels that medical science was still struggling to understand. She could process complex multidimensional problems in moments, see patterns that escaped traditional computational systems. The Galactic Archive, a neutral scientific body that documented significant civilizational events, struggled to categorize what had happened. This wasn't a traditional war. It was an evolutionary event that had rewritten the fundamental understanding of consciousness, technology, and potential. Diplomatic envoys from other spacefaring civilizations began to arrive, their curiosity overwhelming their initial caution. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They hadn't just survived an invasion, they had transformed their would-be destroyers. Fragments of the Caraxian collective that had developed individual consciousness began to integrate into human society. They weren't conquered. They were curious, learning, growing. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their existence for millennia had been shattered, replaced by something far more complex. Dr. Sophia Reis led a new interdisciplinary research initiative, part psychology, part quantum physics, part philosophical exploration. They were mapping the new frontiers of consciousness that the war had revealed. Every day brought new discoveries that challenged everything previously understood about intelligence. Rafael Ortiz, the former chess grandmaster, now led a diplomatic initiative. His ability to see multiple potential futures made him uniquely suited to navigate the complex new galactic landscape. The war had proven that strategy was less about conflict and more about understanding. Lena Kim's work with xenolinguistics became crucial. Her ability to translate between different forms of consciousness created entirely new communication paradigms. Languages were no longer just about words. They became living, adaptive systems of mutual understanding. The solar system itself had changed. Orbital habitats developed new architectural designs that reflected the fluid, adaptive thinking that had saved humanity. Cities began to look less like fixed structures and more like living, breathing ecosystems of potential. Military academies were transformed. The new training focused not on combat, but on adaptability, creative problem-solving, and understanding. The Adaptive Warriors program became a model for social and technological development. Grand Executors Arcax, or rather, the individual consciousnesses that had emerged from the collective, became unexpected allies. They were learning what it meant to be individuals, to have choice, to understand the value of diversity. Humanity had not just survived. They had shown the galaxy something fundamental about the nature of intelligence itself. As the first interstellar diplomatic missions prepared to launch, Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked out over the recovering Earth. The planet bore the scars of invasion, but there was something else. A new energy, a sense of profound possibility. The war had ended, but something far more important had begun. A new chapter of existence was being written, one possibility at a time.